Welcome to Idea to Investment, the podcast where we dig into the exciting world of entrepreneurship and investment. We tell the stories of the tech creators doing innovative work and the investors who back them up. Along the way, unveiling the fascinating journey from the birth of an idea to scoring crucial investment. We highlight the voices of entrepreneurs, showcasing their grit and creativity, all while gaining insights from the investors who believed in those dreams. Get ready to be inspired, stay informed, and stay tuned as we explore the awesome collision of ideas and investments. Idea to Investment is a production of Tech Alliance of Southwestern Ontario and is sponsored by TD Ferrera Wealth Advisory Group.
Hi, my name is Chuck Baresich. I'm the president of Haggerty AgRobotics down here in Bothwell, Ontario, as well as the general manager of Haggerty Creek Limited.
Hi, I'm Joe Dales. I'm one of the founding partners of RHA Ventures.
Wonderful. I thank you both for joining me. Really appreciate you giving me your time on what must be a very busy time for both of you. Chuck, let's start off. We start our podcast same way every time, and that is with a pitch. So in 30 seconds, tell us about Haggerty.
Well, Haggerty Creek started with my brother and I. We're farmers down here in the Southwest, long-term no-till cash crop growers. And about 20 years ago, we thought that we needed an agronomy company. So that's what we joint ventured with Agri's Cooperative and built an agronomy and grain elevator business down here. And during the growth of that business, we noticed that precision agriculture and digital ag was something that needed to be part of every farmer's journey. And the next evolution of field computers, auto steer systems, and GPSs in tractors is driverless equipment and autonomous robots. And really that's where Haggerty AgRobotics came from, and that started in 2021. And Haggerty AgRobotics, what we're doing is we are integrating robotic platforms onto farms. So basically working with farmers to understand what their problems and challenges are, finding a robotic solution for them. And the space that we're working in is outdoor, like out in the field. So we're looking at, row crops, vegetables, orchards, nurseries, those types of things.
All right, Jill. So talk to us about what was the first time you kind of heard of Haggerty and at what point did RHA Ventures come on board?
Yeah, so my career has been in the agriculture and food space. And I've known Chuck for probably 10 years. He's a very high profile, innovative farmer. So you always want to stay close to people like him. And probably about 4 or 5 years ago, he called me up and said, I bought the first dot robot into Ontario. Do you want to come down? And it's in the field working away now. So jumped in my car and drove down and saw him with this big robot. I think it was spreading fertilizer that day, Chuck.
Yeah, you're right. And really what that was, Ken, for your benefit is, we've all seen robots in movies and things, and the technology that's in farmers' tractors today automates almost everything. Like our sprayer drives itself up and down the field. It turns around in the headland. It controls all of the application automatically already. And so, the thought process is why do I have to be in this cab is kind of a natural one. But back 5 years ago, when I went looking to see, what technology is out there, there's actually very, very few that we could actually get and deploy on our farming system.
So did that mean that you had to kind of design things from the ground up as opposed to getting on board existing technology? Is that what you're saying?
So in this case, where we started from was getting on board some existing technology. And what we had was an entrepreneur from Saskatchewan who had built a robot that didn't necessarily fully understand how it could be used. There's the one side of a robot is we have a machine that drives up and down the field and does something. The next question is does what? And then, so, what is the best use case for that robot? And then even simpler than that, how do you even get the robot to the field? How do you transport it? Logistics. How do you train an operator like to use it? And is it going to be, competitive to what we're doing now? Like, is it going to be an improvement? Like, are we doing, are we actually enhancing our agricultural production, or are we making it worse somehow? There's a lot of questions that go around the robotics side of things. Once those questions are answered, that's when the development process almost begins.
So maybe let's step back a bit, Joe, for you, and kind of walk us through just the history of RHA Ventures and the kinds of investments you were making even before you were exposed to Haggerty.
Yeah, so my partners and I have all had successful careers. I sold our business was when we started called farms.com. So sold my interest in that. And we recognized that in Southwestern Ontario, there's not very much venture capital available and very little for early stage small companies. And so we had trouble raising our money locally here, and we wanted to help that next generation of young entrepreneurs be successful. So that's why we formed RHA and 519 Growth Fund. Over the last 5 or 6 years, I think we've invested in over 40 companies, Chuck being one of them. And we've also helped probably another 100 that we didn't invest in, but we really like the founders. And they might be too early. They might be need to pivot their product or something, but we still really like them. So we support them as well. And we've probably had thousands of pitches over the years. So we're not afraid to go in early. We have strength in agriculture and food because our 13 partners, a lot of us have experience in agriculture. And, we'll do smaller amounts in more companies than a traditional venture capital will do. We're based down at Western Fair in the Grove. And so we support Western Fair. And then we've been able to work as a group to create an ecosystem that just gives these early stage companies a higher probability of success.
So then, Joe, what specifically was it about Chuck himself and about Haggerty that stood out for you and was like, yes, this is definitely a lock for RHA?
So at RHA, we work really closely with early stage companies. And in that case, the founder is absolutely the number one element, and that's what we support. And so, Chuck is a tremendous entrepreneur, great founder, very visionary. So fairly, he just checks all the boxes and a good guy to work with. And so, we typically work with a lot of younger founders that maybe don't have as much experience, but we see great potential in them. And so that's really what we try to do is with our more senior people with their networks and with a bit of capital and our experience, just wrap around that founder so that they have a higher probability of success. Founding a company is probably the hardest thing you can possibly do, and it's very lonely at times. And so you don't have too many friends that you can talk to. Because we have a lot of experience, we're kind of a founder for founder experience. And so if we haven't seen it in our group, like we have a lot of war stories we can change, can work with the young founders on and just help them with their startups.
All right, Chuck. So talk about that relationship and how valuable it was to have not just a friend with, deep pockets, but also a friend that had a wealth of experience.
Well, the one thing that we've discovered, with all the businesses that we have or that I'm involved in, is that when I look out in the backyard, there isn't a money tree just growing out there. And so that is something that, having a partnership with the right partners is so essential. And, you can try to do things on your own and a few people get very lucky. But the reality is that, having partners and having people that you can, not even necessarily financial investors, but just people to talk to about about the process of your company can be very strategic and very important in the development. When I think back to some of the work that we've done and that we're working on, um, access to the Rolodex, making connections, adding some structure to the approach. What should you do first? What should we do second? What's the next thing that we should be looking on? This is where the experience and having other advisors come from. There's a quote, and it's not mine, and I don't even know if it's Steve Jobs' quote, but it's about, and we see this as well. Like, as we get pitched a lot, different companies. It's really easy to have an idea. Having an idea is wonderful and it's great. It's very, very difficult to have a product that somebody will buy. And it's not a real company, it's not a real product until you start getting checks, until people are willing to, if you are a farmer and the farmer says, I've got X amount of budget to either send my kid to school, to pay my mortgage payment, to, whatever. And if they choose to give some of that money to you as a company or as a business, that's a very, very significant indication that you're adding something of value. And so, through working with people like Joe and the people that he surrounds himself with, he can help us kind of sort through that chaff, and just say, what is the actual product? What do we actually need to focus on? How do we turn that into something that we can become profitable and be successful?
You mentioned, Chuck, about we're talking about farms that have a finite budget and, have to be very sensible with deciding where they're going to spend their money and making that leap from an idea to a product. I mean, when it comes to ag tech, that's a really big leap. So, Joe, maybe talk a little bit about risk. You say, you like getting in on the ground floor with, with startup companies. But as far as startups go, this one, as Chuck mentioned, is a pretty big leap between the idea, the iteration, and then actually seeing these robots in the field. How do you manage that risk?
Yeah, so I think risk reward kind of go hand in hand. In Chuck's case, we recognized he had a footprint into what's going to become a huge opportunity, robotics. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, he couldn't do this. We didn't have the software. We didn't have the technology. And so, we want to get into a sector that we know is going to grow, and then, we'll rise up, the market will rise up to meet us. And so we're a little bit more patient, as Chuck talked about, than the regular VCs. We recognize it's going to take a few years, and getting in early, hopefully there's a reward there for Chuck too, for building this great company that's emerging, and balancing the risk. That's part of how you make these investments, and being patient enough that you can hold your breath for a long time type thing. We're really excited about what Chuck's done, and we've also been able to attract other resources. He can maybe talk a little bit about the support we've gotten from the Ministry of Agriculture and Food, and he's led the development of what's called the AgRobotics Working Group, and that's supporting the whole ecosystem. So it's not just Chuck and I. He's gotten some other strategic partners like the OMAFA Group and Farm Credit Canada to work with us on Innovation Farms Ontario. And then Western Fair as well has been hugely supportive and become a strategic partner. So goes back to that saying, it takes a village to raise a child. The same with a startup. We've built a really nice ecosystem here, and Tech Alliance has been part of that as well.
It takes a village to build a robot, apparently, and I think
robotics business, yeah,
exactly. This is kind of what you were talking about earlier, Chuck, when you said access to that Rolodex, right?
Well, 100%, and we're like, my brother and I are corn and soybean farmers, and so here we are. We were playing around trying to do weed removal in horticulture crops, and I don't have horticulture crops. And a farmer can spot posers from 50 miles away just driving in, right? And so, right away we knew if we were venturing into the vineyard market or into the produce market or fresh vegetable market, that we needed to have experts and relationships to help us through that space. And that's where the autonomous working group was born. Um, Ontario already has a great university network with researchers that are doing all kinds of neat stuff. Ontario already has an extension network through the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture and Food that works on weeds and weed removal and these kinds of things. And what we were trying to do is introduce some new technology into that ecosystem. And one of the things that always bothered me about agriculture in Canada is that the Canadian farmers would always look overseas first and say, well, what's happening overseas, and sometimes it's for good reason, but if you think about it, we have a manufacturing sector here in Ontario, we have a research sector, we have a investment in battery technology, we have lots of organizations, Tech Alliance is one of them, that's trying to support this in other sectors, in medical, bioscience, automotive. So why not agriculture too? And so this working group, grew from 10 people meeting on a Friday morning to a membership of over 300. And we still meet every Friday morning. We had an in-person meeting last Friday in London. And then what is spawned out of that is Innovation Farm Ontario, which is a collection of my farm and some other locations, representing agricultural production in Ontario, where we can take robotics and other technology, whether it's sensors, whatever, robotic systems, try them in real world farm conditions without jeopardizing a farmer's livelihood. We can let these robots operate as they need to. When we propose these ideas, very thankfully, Western Fair agreed. Western Fair said, "Hey, we're a 100-plus-year-old ag society. We are supposed to be the ones promoting agricultural development. So, sure, we'll help you do this." The Ontario Ministry of Agriculture and Food has agreed to help the working group, and Farm Credit Canada has agreed to help fund the Innovation Farm Network. And what that's doing is that's just putting our all of our efforts on adoption, as a ecosystem, as Joe talks about, into high gear. And it's encouraging more small companies to kind of come forward and say, "Hey, we have something. Let's see if we can turn this into a product."
And to follow up on what Chuck's talked about, the farmers, there's been a vineyard that's been testing the equipment for what, 2 or 3 years, Chuck, and then
Yep.
and then it's been de-risked. They know it works on their farm. They're able to buy the very expensive piece of equipment, and they're going to be adopting it and using it themselves.
Right.
Without those trials, without having it out in that Niagara area for a couple of years, the risk to the farmer to buy a $150,000 implement, they just can't do it.
It's interesting that Chuck mentioned, looking overseas at the technology when we really, are trying to support homegrown innovations. I mean, the current landscape certainly has got to be changing things. I know you both just came off of the farm show, the London Farm Show. Was that a robust topic of conversation, the current landscape and how it might change, Joe?
Farmers know that we have a very interdependent relationship with the U.S. It's largest economy in the world. Here in London, we're crossing Port Huron, and we've got friends and family there. So when the president's making these changes, we're aware of it, and it will impact our businesses, hopefully not too negatively, but even commodity prices, when there's uncertainty, they probably go down. So everybody, the farmers, I thought were very, they were cautious, but they were more positive than I thought they might be. They're proud of what they do. They know they're some of the best farmers in the world. People have to eat. And so, I think we realize we can't be as dependent on the US to be an open market as we used to. So maybe we spend more time marketing our produce into Mexico or Europe or Asia and diversify ourselves a little bit. So I think there's quiet confidence there that, Canada's going to be fine. We've gone through wars and depressions and recessions and so on. But I think we're ready for a kind of a disruptive few years here. And I like our farmers. I like how we do things. And so I'm pretty confident it won't be easy, but I'm pretty confident we'll be fine when the dust all settles.
Chuck, aside from farm exports and produce, how do you think the current landscape is going to affect the ag tech industry? Will it mean that we as Canadians, as Ontarians, need to focus more on local homegrown innovations, or will it just strengthen those European relationships, places like the Netherlands?
I think it's going to do probably a little bit of both. The first thing too is that, in terms of competitiveness, our farmers need to be competitive, and we need to always be looking 10 years out to say, how do we improve, because we can't rely on a low dollar to make us competitive shipping into the US. Pushing that easy button is not a long-term solution, and we can and we will do, we can do those things. The other thing that it's an opportunity actually is that the manufacturers or the people that are looking at building things in Europe and other places, they're going to look to Canada instead of the US. And that's one of the angles that we can look at is that we have access to lots of resources here in this country. And we do lots of farming, we do lots of technology development. So I think we have lots of opportunity. And two, as farmers here in Canada, there's lots of stuff we can be growing here that we're not. And so let's just keep, and the technology that's being developed is enabling that to happen, because it is addressing some of the labor shortages, whether it's climate change, climate risks, labor shortages, costs, whatever. The technology opens some doors that maybe weren't open before.
I'm interested. Give me an example of a crop, for example, that technology would allow today that it might not have in the past.
Well, so if you think about growing an onion, and so if you were a traditional corn farmer that is thinking about going into vegetables, that farmer is not used to bringing in workers and the tillage and the management requirements and those kinds of things. If we can bring in a robot that can look after that vegetable crop and do the weed control and the planting without relying on temporary foreign workers, for example, that enables a farmer who would be somewhat risk averse to start producing those crops. Another way to look at it is in the greenhouse space or in the indoor environment, which is not something that we are part of, but the technology development on indoor systems, whether it's the mushroom robots or whether it's other greenhouse robots, enables those facilities to be more competitive than they were in the past. And then we can start to grow that produce and those berries and things here in Canada rather than relying on bringing them up from California.
All right, I do want to jump back a little bit and talk about the farm show a little bit more too, Joe. Aside from the current landscape and the challenges that we are facing, Joe, just talk about the value of having all of these like-minded individuals and just how important that farm show is.
Yeah, the farm show every year, and we also have the National Poultry Show here at Western Fair, we find we have guests coming from all around the world. And so we were able to host people from Western Canada, from the US, all around Ontario. And, we've gotten used to Zoom, but it's still a lot of relationships, a lot of trust building, a lot of communicating. And so it's nice to have people there. And then people learn from building out their networks as well. So yeah, we loved hosting the show here. And I don't know, it's a fun week. Busy, long week, but a fun week.
Yeah, I'm sure I can see Chuck nodding his head in agreement of a busy week, a fun week, but the importance of that networking, Chuck, I'm sure can't be understated.
Well, no, it can't, and there's the network. The networking piece is important, from a business development side of things. Part of that, and it's interesting, farming is a bit of a small community, and the first time that we brought robots to a farm show, a lot of farmers just walked right past them because they didn't know what they were. And and the odd farmer would look at it, and some of them would just burst out laughing. And the second year we came to the farm show, they said, "Oh, you're back. Okay, that's interesting. So what did you actually do with this thing?" Oh, and the third year we went to the farm show, and actually in this case, this will be the fourth year. The booth is busy, and because people start to say, "Hey, wait a minute, I've seen that thing before. I've read about it. I've heard about it. There is something to this." So part of that networking is also building confidence, kind of within that community, to say that this stuff is real, and it gets people starting to think. So if somebody comes to the farm show one year and they see a piece of technology, sometimes it's a little bit too abstract to kind of understand how that might fit. But then when they go home and it's 32 degrees out and they're bending over, pulling weeds, pulling weeds out by hand and wiping their brow off, they're starting to say, maybe there is a place for this cultivator robot in my farm. And they start to think about how it might fit. And when they come the next year, they're ready with that question.
So it's interesting, a hard sell, clearly, selling the product to the farmers. But was it an equally hard sell when, in those earlier days, even pre-RHA, looking for investors?
Oh, it's still a very hard sell, and one of the reasons why is that trying to separate the ideas from the products is very challenging. There's just a lot of noise out there and a lot of promises being made, and and at the end of the day, I think I've been around long enough to say, will a farmer actually write a check for that? So I think that makes it a challenge. The other thing is that, farmers, for the most part, have already invested in technology. It might be outdated technology, but they've already invested. And so they're not just going to sit there and say, well, I'm going to take all my existing equipment and park it in the bush and go and buy your equipment. There has to be a very compelling, kind of business case and reason. And so that's why understanding, logistics, use case, serviceability, reliability, support, all those questions have to be addressed first. And if you can't address that with a farmer, you're definitely not going to address it with an investor. Because the investors have been around the block as well, and they can understand, kind of what is fluff and what's real. And interestingly enough, trying to convince a traditional agricultural lender like Farm Credit to get involved was also interesting, because same thing, they're like, what are these robots and what are they going to be worth and what's going to happen to them, and is this technology going to stick, and all these kinds of things. It's we're actually bringing the whole industry along with us. The latest one, or the most recent one, was insurance companies. And what insurance companies think about this, and we got to bring them along. And I'm actually speaking to the Workplace Safety and Insurance Board next week, because that's the next question is worker safety around these new robotic systems. So it's the whole ecosystem has to move along. And so people wonder why investors are leery. It's not just investors.
Yeah, Joe, I can see you nodding the whole through that whole conversation. And I think I would say RHA is probably not necessarily the exception to that rule, but maybe has a better understanding of all of those challenges.
Yeah, and it's the investment community's national in Canada and also international, especially with the US. And so we've seen where there was lots of venture capital 2 years ago. Last year it started slowing down because people were worried about is there going to be a change in government? Is Trump going to get back in? And then as soon as Trump's gotten back in, he's created all this uncertainty. So the venture capital pool is smaller. I would say the market is very tight right now. And so it's hard to get investment. We're raising money with 519 Growth Fund 2. It's been a hard slug, and it's hard. And our group has lots of experience, reputations, and knowledge, and networks, and it's hard for us. So it's even harder for these small startups where maybe the CEO has never done it before, and and that does constrain innovation, constrains the number of startups, and it's a challenge. So we try to support those young founders as much as we can, encourage them to get sales as fast as they absolutely can, because that helps their valuation and it helps tell the story, and it de-risks for follow-on investment. But it's spring 25 is not a great time for going out and raise a big round of investment at a high valuation.
Well, we always end our episode by asking our founders the same question. And Chuck, that question is, if you could go back in time and give yourself a piece of advice that might have helped you avoid an obstacle or a hurdle, what advice would you give yourself?
I think I was told, by Joe, 3 or 4 years ago, just take your time, conserve cash, and take your time. And I'm not the most patient person in the world, and I've done my best to do that. But I think what I should have done is actually taken some more time and laid that out, because the world moves fast, like we understand that, but it doesn't actually move as fast as you think. And we don't need to, as a person kind of starting in this space, I think I could have been even more patient than I even was. So I think that's something I would tell myself, just to relax. You can slow down a little bit and you'll be okay.
That's why they say patience is a virtue. Gentlemen, I appreciate you both giving me your time this afternoon and joining me to talk about a really fascinating emerging sector of technology. Chuck, Joe, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
Idea to Investment is sponsored by TD Ferrera Wealth Advisory Group and is made possible by Tech Alliance of Southwestern Ontario. If you'd like to learn more about Tech Alliance and the resources available to entrepreneurs and startups, go to techalliance.ca. My name is Ken Eastwood. Thank you so much for joining me.